Zone is a dude who was in music and then left music and came back to music because he couldn't find a job. He's scared to death of the real world.
What influenced you to start making music?
When I was maybe 14 or 15, I got some turntables and started DJing. I had a little cheap sampler, 2 seconds of sampling time. And, you know, I just started sampling little bits of records. And when I was 15, I worked a summer job for 2 years, saved up, and I bought my first SP1200. You know, I started interning when I was 15 years old at Power Play in Queens, and I watched Large Professor work on the Vagina Diner record with Akinyele. And back then I was just sweeping floors. I was young, but I called them up, Yellow Pages, like, yo, I see this on the back, or that was the only way in. So, you know, I got my start interning, I'd say from when I was about 15 till I was about 21, I was constantly interning. So I started interning at Vance's. I just wanted to be a producer engineer, that's it. But then the same thing happened in college that happened in high school. You know, like I was working on my senior project for college, which was Music for Two Madre. That was my first album. And I had beats, and you know, all the music people know each other. Everybody who rhymed at Purchase knew each other. It was like a little small-knit community, and people weren't showing up to the studio. So I just said, well, I'm gonna rhyme on it then, fuck it. So I rhymed on that shit because nobody except my man Al Sheed was showing up. So my rap thing was accident. I never wanted to rap. I just did it because I got tired. I don't like to wait on people.
Yeah, so. I hear that. So, I mean, when you're building a song, what part of the song gives you the most trouble? Is it finding the loop? Is it the bass line? Is it...
When I'm building a song, the hardest part is getting a bunch of things to go in pitch. So if you find like a loop or you find a sample, you chop it up, whatever. I mean, I play drums, so the drums are the easiest part. But then you have to find, I like changes. Like I don't want it to just run the whole way. You know, like Premier is good at that. Like certain producers are good at that. I was never good at that. So I like to add a lot of bridges and B sections and have it flow like a song, like a traditional jazz song or a funk song where no two bars are the same. So you have to chop a sample a different way. Like I'll have like 30 or 40 sequences per beat, just with subtle changes. So the hardest thing is getting a bunch of sounds to keep it from getting boring, like that go in pitch. And I always like that wall of sound approach that Public Enemy used to do, where you're not even really looping things, or maybe you'll half loop something, but you'll have a bunch of different sources combined. And to me, that's what made sampling an art form.
It may sound ignorant, but fuck it, it is what it is. I never did like spending the night at people's crib. Never did sleep.
So, I mean, when did you figure out that this is J Zone, like this is my sound, you know?
I developed a style where when you're chopping all these different parts, it kind of has this staccato sound, not the drums, but the music. Like when you have a sample and you have 8 different pieces and you're replaying a pattern with those samples, it kind of has this herky-jerky thing. And I used to sample records that were staccato in nature. And I used to just sample the weirdest shit I could find. So whenever there was a beat that was kind of funky, but the sample was weird, they kind of knew it was me, and just the way that I would chop it. And I didn't set out like, yeah, I'm gonna find my own style. It was just like, I couldn't afford them. I couldn't go to A1 and get them $90 records off the wall because I didn't have the money to get that. And like my roots are funk. Like I started as a bass player, so I always, you know, my father was like, you started out at funk, you kind of got into hip hop by default. He's like, you should go back to funk now because now you have an avenue to do that. And every time you hear about live drums in hip hop, it's always just clean MTV Unplugged shit. Like I always hated live instruments in hip hop, not because it's live instruments, because they couldn't make it sound like samples. So I just started doing a lot of research. Eventually I started recording stuff, and you know, I found that with like a cheap setup, I was getting the same sound that people were spending thousands of dollars for plugins and crazy mixing boards and shit, and I was like, wow, these drums sound like breaks. So, you know, I did my own breaks on the album, and I played a couple of joints live, and then people started asking for stuff, and then it was like, after the album came out, I was like, well, now I just want to be able to get my skills up drum-wise, so now I'm just been focusing on trying to practice and learn, and it's difficult, you know, to learn an instrument later in life.
Change the way you look at production, it sounds like, in general.
Yeah, like there's a break called You'll Like It Too by Funkadelic, and it was the intro to I Know You Got Soul. Eric B. Rocket, and all these years, you know, we chopped it up, we sampled it, we play it out, and we DJ, and then I sat down at the kit and tried to play it. That shit is impossible. Like the amount of control you have to play that clean, that's what fucked me up. So like now every time I hear that song or I hear somebody sample it, I'm like, son of a bitch, like that's, like, it's easy to loop it up, but to try to play that shit is hard. Like that is a very difficult, that and Funky Drummer are like two really difficult breakbeats. So it just changed the way I hear music and hip hop and everything else, but it's a learning experience, so.
Strapped to the bed, semi-conscious acting dead. Spit on the head nurse, like I brushed, like I smacked the fed.
I think with that Cage beat and a lot of those beats from that era, I would use like a lot of Latin records and I would get like a percussion that was like or some weird shit. And I would turn that into the hi-hat. Like I would syncopate these percussion sounds and it would make it like a really weird, like I would use like shakers and weird castanets and shit to kind of like pull the beat, and I used to purposely cut back the high end. So when you played it, I purposely made it kind of muddy because I hated that crisp hi-hat shit so much. Like I actually like the southern shit better when they're using 30 seconds, like that was kind of cool. Like with Dipset, how they used to, because I'm like, all right, if you're using hi-hats, you get creative. You know, use an open hi-hat or throw a hi-hat in a weird place, but just that straight I used to hate that shit. So I used to just find like, and I think with the Cage beat, I remember it was just a bass drum, a snare drum, and there was like a, it was like, I used to do that all the time back then, just the weirdest percussion sound I could find and just have it looping in like a rhythmic thing, meter or whatever, and it would just, it would propel the beat as opposed to a traditional hi-hat.
So what's your favorite break to sample? If your theme song was a breakbeat, what would it be?
I like them offbeat ones, so it's try to have your own sound and don't be afraid to make mistakes and experiment. That's really it. That's really what I would say. You know, experimentation is the only, like, try to break the rules. Like, don't listen to what's current. Just, I would say if you're working on an album, don't listen to anything at all current. Don't listen to anything. Just listen to like old Motown and shit and see what happens. You know, because if you listen to what's going on, you kind of get sucked into trends, and then by the time your shit comes out, it'll sound like old shit. So that's really all I could say.
When I met up with Jay Zone, we talked about a lot of different things, but something in particular that stuck with me is his method of sampling and the way that he chops up records. It really inspired me to do my own thing.